I was scrambling to turn down my telephone before we got on the air. I'm always frightened that I bring the cell phone in so I can read some of the texts, but I have to turn the sound down. And I do that because I was sitting in a studio one day some years ago doing a radio show, and my telephone started ringing. It happened to be my sister, who knew exactly what time I was on the air, but for some reason decided I needed to call with apparently without realizing that I keep the telephone with me during the course of the show. I'm sure she wouldn't be confused by any of that, and I won't say anything more because growing up in our family, we were three. That is, three children, and if we had been the Three Stooges, she would have been Mo. You don't want to make her angry. 7 minutes now after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and NewsRadio1310.com. Quite normally, I have that telephone way, way down long before I come into the studio, but it's been a very busy morning. And now, if I had a 4 hour show, I could get through everything that I have collected today, but I don't. So I promise you, I'd like to talk about some big things later in the show, which will not get a lot of attention today in talk radio because everyone is going to be focused on what happened in Iowa last night or what happened earlier this week in Oregon. In fact, I'll talk about that in just a moment. But there was a story out this morning, and I had read it last night in the Wall Street Journal, that there were some fears that our GDP, that is, gross domestic product, could drop down to about only 0.8% growth, less than a percentage point. It's actually lower than that for the fourth quarter of last year. Thank you, Democrat, when you see one today. In other words, the economy has completely stalled out, and it could get worse before Election Day. Now, if you're a Republican, you're licking your chops at that prospect, but you don't want to see people lose their jobs, and that is potentially, I think, something that could happen out there. That is something that is on the horizon, and it looms darkly if you're a Democrat running for public office here in 2016. If there is time before the end of the program, I have some more expansive thoughts on all of that. The thing is, I need to, because it has been such a hot topic on this program, address the video that was released by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the shooting of LaVoy Finicum. Some of you may have already seen that. They had an airplane in the sky he had sat for about 10 minutes after the initial roadblock in his truck and eventually just decided, I've had enough of this. He turned around and decided to leave. And as he got down the road, and he got quite a distance down the road, he was cut off again by another roadblock, and he tried to avoid it, nearly hit somebody, ended up skidding his truck through some snow off to the side of the road. The truck got stuck. He got out. Now, the FBI, I have some sound here from the special agent in charge who was speaking at a news conference in Burns, Oregon yesterday, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Here's my take on all of this. My first sighting of it this morning, two friends sent it my way. One is a military veteran, and he also has a son who is in law enforcement, and he said this is out and outright murder. And another friend sent a shorter version of it along, which I looked at as well. If you supported what was happening at the Malheur Wildlife Refuge, you would probably say the same thing. And this is where people's perceptions, their past experience comes into all of this. Now, and if you didn't like LaVoy Finicum, who seemed a most amiable man when he was being interviewed on television and radio over the last month. If you didn't like him, you think good riddance, and everyone says, well, he told a reporter from CNN he had a death wish and wanted to die, so that's what he did. Unless you are Mr. Spock and you have a Vulcan mind meld, you have no idea what was going through his head in the final minutes of all of this, because his adrenaline was pumping. The agents and the troopers that happened to be at the scene, their adrenaline was pumping. So you got the two sides, one saying it's cold-blooded murder of this man, and you've got the other side that says, no, he was trying to get them to shoot him so he wouldn't have to go to prison because, gee golly gosh, that's what he always wanted. Here's my take, and it's somewhere in between. I will offend both sides of that argument. I watched the video, quite a lengthy portion of it today, and then what I happened to see was the truck get stuck. Driver's side door opens up. He comes out with both hands in the air. So he was looking to surrender. And then he reached for his left pocket, his left side, and then his hands went back up in the air. Then he reached a second time for his left side, and with that, somebody came out of the woods behind him with a long gun and shot him dead. Now, the argument is that he was left to die for 10 minutes, and he didn't get any treatment. Perhaps he could have lived. But there were other people, or at least one other person in the truck, and the agents were trying to get that person to come out. They didn't. You're not going to go over and tend to a wounded fellow when someone else may have something trained at your back. I understand that. I'm not giving a pass to the agents, but that is procedure. That is nothing unusual in this situation. My feeling, though, is about this, and this is where I come down in the middle of it. I was stopped by a police officer. I must have been about 19 years old. I've mentioned this before. Our perceptions generally are related to what has happened to us in the past, and I've had really good experiences with law enforcement out on the highway for the most part in my life. I remember one time my mother had come to visit me when I lived in Vermont, and we were driving toward Lake Champlain because I was taking her home back to New York State. And we came up on a Vermont State Police roadblock, and the fellow who was standing there in the middle of the road motioned me, and then I started to speed back up, and he started yelling at me to stop, and I did. And I rolled down the window, and I apologized. I said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your hand motions." He said, "Oh, all right, sorry about that. Go ahead." Good experience, right? It could have been worse. You keep your head on. You don't roll down the window and say, "Look there, Dingaling, don't give me the wrong hand signal." That might get you in some trouble, and I could see how that could upset the guy on the other end of this. That was a good experience. It turned out to be a good experience. But when I was 19 or so, I remember getting pulled over. I knew the police officer. He happened to be a family friend, so it wasn't like he was going to beat me over the head for whatever I had done, and it wasn't anything too terribly serious. But he asked me for, license and registration. My license was in my wallet. That was easy. But my registration, of course, was in the glove compartment. And I think I had been told that's where you keep it. But I had taken the registration along with a copy of my insurance card, and I had stuffed those into my vehicle manual. I thought, well, all safekeeping, everything all in one spot. And as I pulled the vehicle manual out of the glove compartment, he said, "It's not in your vehicle manual." Well, yes, it is. No, it's not. And he's probably thinking, nobody out there is sticking this stuff in their dang vehicle manual. This kid's confused, and I've got to straighten him out. But it was there. And so I can see how sometimes there's a miscommunication. And here's what I think happened. See, we don't have any sound with what's going on coming out of Oregon. You got an airplane flying above. You've got a silent video of what's below. Remember the first Gulf War where General Kelley would hold those news briefings? And they would show all of the explosions going on down below as we were bombing the snot out of the Iraqi Republican Guard. Wasn't it the Republican Guard? And we were just, tearing them to pieces. But you didn't hear anything. All you'd see was, maybe a truck rolling down a road, then a puff of smoke, and that was the end of it. So there's no sound with all of this. I believe Finicum got out. And I don't know this. I'm just telling you, like everyone else, we're filling in the blanks according to our own personal experiences and our past experiences. I think he got out of the truck and his hands went up in the air. It is very possible someone said, "Throw down your weapons." Now, the FBI says he was carrying a 9mm in one of his pockets. Now, if you don't believe the FBI, you'll say that was a drop weapon because the video ends shortly after his shooting, and then there's a flash grenade that they threw at the truck to try to get the other people out of the truck. But I think perhaps if someone ordered him to do that, he may have reached for his sidearm. But then if someone says, "Keep those hands up," then his hands go back up in the air, which you see in the video. And then with all of these people, and the adrenaline is pumping on both sides, remember that. Both sides are just, they are, especially because he turned around and they would say he fled the scene in the parlance of law enforcement. They're upset about that. Blood pressure is just sky high for everyone involved. And somebody again had yelled, "Throw down any weapons." And again, his hand goes down a second time. And somebody misinterprets that as the adrenaline is pumping, and he's shot dead. And that's the tragedy of all of this. Now, a lot of people out there are going to say, "Bill, you're dead wrong. I've watched it." But there's an old piece of research that was done during a football game, and it turns out that when referees are making calls on the field, if you're the fan, let's say you've got Denver and Carolina playing, and if you're a Denver fan, you're going to perceive the referee's calls mainly against your team in the Super Bowl. But if you're a Carolina fan, you're going to see them mostly against, you're going to have the perception that the refs don't like the Panthers. And that's how this works. I'm not offering you any theory here other than the fact that this is what I think may have happened. I'd like to know more. I do have a little bit of hesitancy. I've got nothing against my local police. God bless them. They're out there. They keep us safe. But in the past, when it has come to sometimes these engagements with federal agents, and I go back to that story with Randy Weaver, we've been, 24 years since that happened? And I'm telling you right now, there was an attempt to cover up what really happened there. There is simply no way Randy Weaver's dog could have shot those cops. And I'm exaggerating there, but the dog barked at some people in the woods. So the dog was shot. You got a little boy, somebody's shooting his dog, and he doesn't know who it happens to be, so, he tries to defend himself, and then he's shot dead. I'm telling you, afterward, a lot of people who wanted to make sure they still got their pensions and could retire from their work as federal agents, they went forward, and they decided to fudge the story best that they could. That's why later on, when what was really, it did come out what really happened, why Mr. Weaver ended up with a settlement, even though he lost a son and his wife in that situation. 817. We have a caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Hey, good morning, Bill. The fact that the Bundy's company didn't open fire, yet that car was riddled with bullet holes, is evidence of what this was all about. This was retribution for what happened in Southern Nevada, and they had got themselves solemnly whipped in Southern Nevada, and they had to get back at them for it. That's all it was. And you look at the Hunger Games, the guy says you got to remember who the real enemy is. Well, we were showing who the real enemy is. Right there. They're the terrorists, the people that are terrorizing Americans.
Thank you much for the telephone call. And there was a lot of shooting going on as a Finicum sped down the road. It was like one of those old Bonnie and Clyde movies. You're up next. We got about a minute before the break. You're on the air on Top Story.
Let it go, fat man. You can't be pulling this yard no more than what it is. You've seen the video. Now
I know it's difficult because it's English as a second language. You can't understand every word I'm saying. You clearly have an inability to do that. This guy used to have another job. You remember that? Before he started calling radio stations, he actually had a very incorrect job.
Hello, boys and girls. It's me, the Frito Bandido. You know what I heard about you? I heard you want to be a Frito Bandido like me. You too? Then you must sing the Bandido song. Let's sing together. You just follow
all I'm going to tell you right now is that Bandidos end up usually going the same way. It's a terribly sad state of affairs. 20 minutes after 8 o'clock. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. That's the problem. If you can't really speak English, you likely can't hear every word of it, so, you're unable to really put together a coherent argument in response. 33 right now. Well, of course, that's why you're a big fan of big government, so somebody can give you something for free all the time because you don't have the wherewithal in your own life to succeed. We've got more on the way. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Look, I just want to make it clear. I want to ban all meth dealers from calling the program in the future. 824, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 34. I also want to tell you about our good friends at High Desert Meat Processing right here in Twin Falls, Idaho, where they process one animal at a time, and what you bring in is what you get back. Darren Van Horn, the owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls, he's been at this over 30 years. Visit High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook, and there are reviews of other customers there, and I think if you read those, you'll be pleased. You can give High Desert Meat a call for all of your wild game and domestic processing needs. The number, 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking. Nothing gets shipped out. Specialty meats such as jerky, pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, kielbasa, breakfast sausage, brats, Polish dogs, hot dogs, and more. USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers and their programs to ensure quality meat. 734-9949. To reach our program this morning, of course, you can call us at 736-0300. That's 736-0300, or shoot me an email at bill.colley on townsquaremedia.com. That's bill.colley at townsquaremedia.com. Last name spelled Colley. And, of course, you're up next. Got a caller with us? You're up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX.
Oh, yeah. Hello. When the Bundys were down in Nevada doing their thing, the main key thing that the government was doing was making a business deal with the Chinese for a power plant. Right now, that's going on in that Oregon area, Russians buying weapons, weapon quality uranium that they can mine out
In
of there.
fact, I think the reason the Paiute Indians are so big on getting these guys out of there, or they were big on getting them out of there, is the Paiutes stand to make, for all of their bluster about the fact that this was harming their holy ground and the environment. They see a way to make a killing on all of the mining as well for uranium and some of the other. I believe there's even
But
some
it's
gold.
Russia. It's Mother Russia, okay? And
Well, it may be
a man
Mother
just
Russia,
died.
but the fact of the matter is, you've got people who've been disingenuously arguing that we had to get these guys out of there so they could respect Mother Earth, and they're turning around and they're going to make a profit off this because it's their land.
Hillary's directly connected to it.
I'm sure. I thank you much for the telephone call. I'm sure her fingerprints are all over it because we read it somewhere on the internet. We don't recall where. 826, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Thank gosh we are above freezing. It's at 33, and that sheen of ice out there may melt, and you may be able to walk safely today. You're up next. You're on the air.
Yes, this is a terrible tragedy, and the day after the shooting, I went into a business, and there was 3 men sitting at their desks, and I says, okay, guys, what are we going to do here about what happened? We had a guy that was willing to die for freedom. I says, what are we going to do to help save our country, get this government off our back? Somehow we need help. And they all stood there and looked, and they just, nobody has any intentions of doing anything. Again, I mean, I just keep saying this. My wife says, you just keep repeating the same thing about this problem coming through our door. I don't know how else to say it, and maybe I should never call him again. I just sound like a crazy man, I guess. I don't know.
No, you're fine.
But you're emotional. You're mad. You're wanting people to do something. Just like you say, let's hear some other voices call in besides me and whoever else. But I just want, what are we going to do when you ask people what they're going to do so this man's death didn't go in vain? They're just clueless. They just look at you dumbfounded.
And I thank you for the call. I think that people have to. There was a Nevada legislator who said this was civil disobedience. And I brought this up before. Whether or not you liked what they did or you thought it was the right thing, how else are you going to bring attention to the injustice done to Dwight and Steve Hammett, who did their time, and then the government sought more of their blood and sent them back to federal prison? You're up next at 828 on Top Story. Good morning. Hello? Oh, somebody decided to bag the call. You're up next. You're on KLIX.
Good morning, Bill.
Morning. Okay, where are we going with this?
I'm talking about what happened up in Oregon. I'm a retired FBI agent.
Sure.
And I still have a few connections in that line, and I know for a fact that there was a big plan. There was a big plan when this took place up in Oregon. They knew who exactly was in each pickup, and in a situation like that, I know that there was a long-term plan that when this man come out of that pickup, he wasn't going to come back alive.
Why specifically him, though, instead of Ammon Bundy?
Well, because he was more of a focal point when they showed him on the news, and this is not going to end here.
No, I suppose not. You still got some other guys held up there. I've got to get to a break, but I thank you very much for the call. You've got a couple of other guys, 3 left, I think. We had a briefing yesterday. I may be able to share some of the briefing with you following the break. It is true that Finicum became the public face of this just simply because he was so articulate. And he came across, I mean, obviously, as the calmest and the most amiable of the group. It's 8:30. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX. Now, the FBI points out, they had listening devices and modern technology. They knew everything that was going on the entire time. That shouldn't be a shock to anyone. More on this topic on the way. It's 33. So then I don't have to shout on this program, because if I have to shout, we'll get distortion. and that's not a good thing. You hear all that crackling already in signal. If there's a storm nearby, that would only make it worse. If I have to shout, that might mean you have a problem hearing us, right? So you should give a telephone call to Christine Pickup. She's a doctor of audiology. Mott Harrison Audiology in Rupert, 1218 9th Street, unit number 2. Telephone number 208-312-0957, or online, mottharrisonaudiology.com. Hearing loss is strongly associated with depression. When you struggle to follow a conversation, you know exactly what I mean, because you feel that you're left out. You may decide it's easier to skip out that night with friends or a family gathering. Stay connected with those you love. Hearing connects you with people and keeps you engaged in life. Don't let hearing loss keep you from enjoying your family and friends. This is what I was talking about, the news conference yesterday in Burns, Oregon, and this is the special agent in charge, FBI agent in charge. His name is Greg, and I believe it's called Bretzing or Bretzing, but I'll go with Bretzing, speaking with the media, and he's describing the video. The FBI says this is cut and dried.
We believe there are 4 people who still occupy the refuge at this time. Since the establishment of the checkpoints, 9 people have left the refuge. Of those 9 people, 6 have been released and 3 have been arrested by the FBI. There has been a lot of media reporting, or some media reporting, that the situation at the refuge is over. This is not true. As I stated earlier, there are 4 people believed to still be occupying the refuge. The negotiators continue to work around the clock with these individuals to try to help them to leave that area peacefully.
In the government argument, of course, is the video. They feel this is the coup de grace.
When we come back to the video, the white truck leaves the scene at a high rate of speed. It travels some distance, quickly approaching a vehicle roadblock. As the truck approaches the roadblock, there is a spike strip across the road, but it appears Finicum missed it as he attempted to drive around the roadblock. He nearly hits an FBI agent as he maneuvers to the left. The truck gets stuck in the snowbank. Finicum leaves the truck and steps through the snow. On at least 2 occasions, Finicum reaches his right hand toward a pocket on the left inside portion of his jacket.
And again, earlier in the show, if you didn't catch it, I said there's the possibility he may have been told, throw down any weapons. And he may have been getting conflicted advice from various people who were all shouting and, pretty well hopped up on adrenaline. Bill Colley with you on Top Story. It's 8:36, 33. Outside right now at 33, and looks like some of the ice will finally melt off. We have a caller with us, and you're next on News Radio 1310, KLIX.
Hi, Bill. Hey, guys. I called the other day about Jimmy Carter, where the peanut farmers took their tractors up to Washington, D.C. and circled the White House. We should get farmers and ranchers, the guys that a 40-hour week would be a vacation. We should get these guys to go to the different capitals and circle those capitals with their equipment. And then maybe the media will say, what's this all about?
But the media had a chance to look at these fellows out there in the Malheur Wildlife Reservation, or refuge. I keep getting that screwed up. But reservation. Some parks are called reservations still to this day. I'm telling you right now, they will not take the side of anyone who does not fit their worldview. And that is, gosh, if you're doing this, you must not like Barack Hussein Obama. Therefore, you must be a knuckle-dragging racist, and you must want to rape the land. You're not going to get a fair shake with modern media in this country, and rarely even on talk radio. Notice how this story got very little traction, because in the beginning, when they were supporting Cliven Bundy a couple of years ago, and then all of a sudden he made that innocuous comment where he said he's a racist because he said that, that black people were just as bad off today as they were under slavery. Well, he said it inelegantly. What he was trying to point out is the culture of dependence we have in this country is bad for people. Now, you may not like the way he said it, but media, even conservative media, gave up on him at the time, and his family, and the struggle. They're all alone anymore. There's nobody fighting the battle for these people except themselves, and they're dying while they fight it. 8:38, you're up next. You'll have the last say on this topic this morning before we move on to something else. You're on the air.
Good morning, Bill. You brought up a good point about the conflicting orders to this fellow that was shot. It's clear in the video that it's unclear. The FBI says that this was cut and dry, that he was reaching for something. Well, he might have been trying to follow orders and not following orders. He had hands up, he had hands down. The other thing that really bugs me about this is that with the protests across this nation over the last couple of years, certain individuals burnt down businesses, looted businesses, caused millions and millions and millions of dollars of damage, and they walk away from it. And here we've got a small group of patriot citizens that think they're doing a service to to our country, and they've got targets on their backs. It just doesn't make any sense.
And thank you for the call. They actually had been doing paint jobs around the facility, getting it ready for spring and summer and the return of visitors. These are people who were they were servicing vehicles. A couple of the nitwits decided to drive those vehicles around, and they got themselves arrested. Not everybody is the sharpest tool in the shed or the brightest light bulb in the house. But I'm just telling you, they were actually trying to make the place look a little bit better. They know a little bit about public relations too. But once more, very little media coverage, because media sees people with firearms and, oh, my goodness. Because most of your panty wasters in media, they'd blow their own toes off if you ever put a pistol or a long gun into their hands. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310. We're almost to the Trump portion of our program. You wonder how much longer that'll last.